Hi everyone and welcome to today's video. Today I'm going to be giving you 5 tips to become a better editor. One of the biggest things for me when I'm editing is efficiency and keeping the whole process very fluent without getting distracted by having to take my eyes off the keyboard and press a lot of buttons or anything. So trying to do things in the most efficient way possible. And one of the best ways I've found to do that is actually by using custom shortcut keys. So for the processes that you do on a very regular basis whilst editing, you can actually bind to specific keys in order to make it a lot more efficient to do those things. I'm not going to take credit for this idea because I actually watched a rocket jump tutorial where they were talking about this. So as you can see, in Premiere Pro I actually have my own keyboard layout. Normally you have this default one, but I actually have my own one that I've set up. I think the most important ones are the ones that I used in replace of the cut tool. So we have ripple edit and ripple delete, and also ripple trim, I think it's called. So we have ripple trim edit to next playhead and ripple trim edit to previous playhead. And what that does is basically, as I show now, say you wanted to cut something. Normally what you'd have to do to cut something out or shorten a clip, you'd have to select the footage and the audio like this, and then what you'd have to do is actually drag it along. So you drag it along to the point where you want it to go, and then press A and move everything back like that. So that's sort of 2 or 3 processes that you have to go through. Or alternatively, you could cut it and then delete it and then move everything back. So that's pretty similar. Again, that's about 3 steps you have to go through just to cut the piece of footage out. What ripple trim essentially does is just take all those 3 processes and put it into one button. So by pressing Q here like that, I can actually just cut everything and shift it along the timeline so it goes to exactly where my playhead is, and that works for the end of a clip as well. So say I wanted to take a little bit off the end of this, I could just press W and it cuts everything down. And the other really important one that I use all the time is ripple delete. And instead of actually sort of moving things along, if you have a piece of footage in the middle of 2 pieces of footage that you want to cut out, you can actually use ripple delete. So say there's a couple of frames in the center of this piece of footage that I want to cut out, I can actually cut it twice, so cut here and then cut here. And then I can just select everything that I want to delete, press Shift X, which is what I've bound it to, and that will actually get rid of it. Again, the beauty of this is that it replaces having to press about 3 buttons, so it makes your editing much more efficient and much more fluid. So then for volume controls, I've actually bound B and N to increase or decrease the volume. And I've done this because normally when you use the mouse like this to sort of go up and down, it's very tricky to sort of finally select what volume level you want it to be. Whereas B and N sort of just push them up in very small increments. And then if I hold Shift and press either of these, I can change it by much larger increments. The next one's a really common one, and that's just for moving forward and backward by certain frames. So I've bound these to E and R, and then Shift E and Shift R jump forward by I think it's 5 frames. So this just makes navigation of the timeline a lot more simple. Normally the arrow keys would do this, but I've actually just bound it to E and R because that's where my left hand rests naturally, so I don't have to move anything to reach the keys. Then we just have the very simple zooming in and out. I've bound this to Z and Shift Z, again because that's just where my left hand sort of naturally rests, so it's very easy to do. And this just allows you to make very fine adjustments on the timeline, so if I punch in I can make an adjustment by 1 or 2 frames, which is very hard to do when you're zoomed all the way out. Another thing I'd really recommend doing is editing lots of different styles of video. So here I'm just going to play a promotional video that I made for the Suffolk District Council, which is sort of where I live, and it's a film about coastal erosion. It's half an hour long. I made it with my friend Cameron, but this is something that we don't normally do and it's a bit outside our comfort zone. However, we learned a lot about working with clients for this video, and I had to introduce things like lower thirds that I'd never really worked on before. So it was a style of editing that I wasn't particularly familiar with, and I had to sort of play around with techniques, see what I liked, and then also send it off to the clients and see what they thought of it as well. If you've watched many of the videos on my channel, you'll know that I do a lot of visual effects short films, and there are a lot of action scenes and things in those, so I'm quite used to editing fast-paced material, whereas this is very slow-paced, and I kind of had to experiment with how to keep the pacing fast enough that people wouldn't lose interest, but also not cut out anything that was important to the script. So branch out, edit some different styles, and you'll probably very quickly notice that your editing style has improved. Number 3 on my list is music manipulation. And what I mean by this is that I download pretty much all the music that I use for my short films from the YouTube Creator Library, and as they come, they pretty much never fit the exact length or pacing of the film that you're making. So what I do is I chop them up and I sort of crossfade between them so that you can never really tell where the seams are in the music. And I customize the track from the original so that I make it fit perfectly to the pacing and also the length of the video that I'm making, so that it ends at the right time, the peaks and troughs and the dynamics of the music come at the right time. So for the Alien film, the music tracks are on the 2nd and 3rd lines as well as some sound effects, and they're the ones that are the really long ones that you're looking at now where the mouse was. And the way I got around cutting up the songs to fit them to the exact length I needed was to crossfade between the 2 sections, and so it kind of fades the volume in and out of the different clips, and you pretty much don't notice it once it's done. So for that scene, the situation was literally that the bit where the music becomes most intense wasn't in the right place for my the pacing of the film. So all I did was cut it out, put it where I wanted it to be, and then fade it in at the right time and crossfade it with the other bit of music. It's a pretty small thing, but it makes a massive difference, especially for things like short films, because music's such a driving feature. So have a play, cut up some of your audio clips, and try and fade them in between each other. The next thing on the list is color grading, and I think that color grading is a really important thing if you're working as an editor. So what you're looking at now is a flat picture profile, and this is Sony S-Log, and it basically means that the whole image is really washed out so that you don't lose any information in the shadows or the highlights, and you retain all the detail. But obviously this isn't usable, so you have to add a color grade like this, which makes the film look a lot more cinematic. When I color grade in Premiere, I use Lumetri Color. It's just a sort of built-in color grading system in Premiere, and it's got loads of really useful features. So here I'm adding an S-curve to add a bit of contrast back into the scene to make it less washed out. So if I turn what I've just done on and off, you can see that the image is already looking a lot better and it's not washed out like it was before. And then once you've done that, you can get a bit more stylistic. So you can go in and say, oh, I think this is a bit too green, and reduce some of the greens, add a bit more blue to go for that Hollywood action film look. And then you could say you want to add a vignette, so you want to make it even more contrasty, so you could stick one of them on there. A really advanced technique that I sometimes use is adding blues into the shadows and orange into the highlights, because they're complementary colours and that makes it look really nice. So let's see that before and after. Just look how much of a difference playing with a few of those filters made in a couple of minutes. And my final tip is watch what other people do. When you're starting off as an editor, it's very difficult to find your specific style, but if you see how other people do it, you start to pick up a lot of tips and tricks, and you very quickly learn what works and what doesn't work. Casey Neistat, for example, has a very unique editing style that's quite unconventional, but works for the way that he does it. One of my earliest memories of learning to edit was actually watching this video by Vaughan. It's a very simple breakdown on how they edited one of their early videos, Beach Justice, but it's really useful, and it talks about some of the very basic techniques like matching movements between shots. I'll leave a link to this in the description if I remember to, because it's really useful, and Freddie goes into a lot of detail about why they made the choices they did whilst editing. And after watching this video, I started to think a lot more about the choices I was making whilst editing. And this is another example of really unique techniques whilst editing. So this guy talks a lot about how to do different and sort of arty transitions between two shots, which I found really interesting. The more of other people's work that you watch and absorb, then the more you can translate it into your own work. Editing's one of those things that seems really simple, but then the more you learn, the less you realise you actually know about it. But having done it for a while, I think that these 5 tips are some of the most important things that you need to know, especially while starting off. I hope this video has been useful for all of you beginner editors out there, and hopefully it will help you improve your own work in the future. If you found this useful, consider liking and subscribing for more videos like this. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you very soon.